I'm Amy Dolan, and this is the Feeding People podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Feeding People. I'm Amy Dolan, your host, and I'm so glad you're here today for our conversation at the table. We've got a great show ahead. As always, if you're able to go to Apple Podcasts and rate and review our show, subscribe, all the good things, please do that for us. It helps us out so much as we're getting this show started. I love reading your comments. I love reading your shares on social media as you're sharing the show with your friends and family. It means so much to us. So thank you so much for all of that. Today at the table, I have my good friend, Caleb Johnson, who I'm just so thrilled is at the table with me today. Welcome, Caleb.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
So this is our first brunch podcast. Yeah. Are you so happy that we just had brunch?
I'm honored to be the first brunch guest, and brunch was amazing.
Thank you for saying that. And now I kind of feel like we should be doing brunch podcasts every day because that was so much fun.
I would agree with that.
And you kind of set the standard, like you made it great. So I'm just hereby making an executive decision. There will be no more dinners for the Feeding
Brunch
People podcast.
Brunch is always a good idea.
Brunch is always a good idea. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So thank you so much for being at the table today. Thanks for having brunch with us. So we've known each other. We were trying to figure it out, maybe 10 years.
Yeah, crazy.
It's so crazy. And what's so crazy is that even though we've known each other almost 10 years, we just met in person for the first time in September last year, which is insane, right? But like so modern day friendship, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we know each other we both used to work in children and family ministry in the church, and we worked at separate churches. You worked in Michigan. I worked here in Chicago, but the community is tight and close, right? And so we were online Twitter friends.
Yes, we were.
And I hope that we still are, but I guess we don't talk that much on Twitter as much.
No, we talk like we're real life friends.
Oh,
now, so.
Even better. It's great. So we knew each other from Twitter. We would message, we would talk, we would, have a friendship, all that. And then you came to Chicago in September and we went to sushi, and it was like we had known each other in real life all our life. I just felt like I knew you. Yeah, yes. It was so good. So that's how we know each other. And I'm so excited you're here today, and you're going to tell your story and show your wonderful Caleb light today.
Thank you.
How would you introduce yourself?
I am a writer. I'm a storyteller. That has taken on many different forms in the past several years. I've worked in, like you said, ministry. I've worked in PR. I'm currently writing a book, so I will soon hopefully be adding author to that list.
Yeah.
But that's what I do. I communicate and I develop messaging to communicate with people.
So great. So good. And we share a love of food in general, of course, right? Like we're always asking, you've been in Chicago this weekend, and last night you were like, where should I eat? I'm like, all right, only give them 2 recommendations.
Yes.
And then scale it back, let them choose.
Right.
But we love food. We love restaurants. It was so fun. We were just talking about our prized possessions being cookware.
Oh my goodness.
Right?
It's unbelievable. I just discovered that I recently moved, and I have more cookware than I do clothing or other items.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So those are definitely my prized possessions.
Right. I was saying, like, if my apartment was on fire, like, of course, I would make sure Kelly's and Maddox are okay. But then I would look to my Le Creuset and carry that with me.
Absolutely.
Which seems kind of impractical, but, it is my love.
My cast iron skillets are sitting in the front seat of my car right now.
Are you serious?
Yes.
I love this. I love this idea. Like, you just never know when you'll need your cast iron.
Never know when you're going to need it. And they're so versatile.
And I mean, how embarrassing if you do need it and you don't have it. Right? Okay, so we share a love of food. We share a love of cooking and cookware and feeding people and a great meal and all that. So what is the best meal you have ever had?
I was thinking about that, and the one that kept coming to mind was last summer. I was in New York with some friends, and we ate at a place called Anejo.
Ooh.
And the meal, I will never forget it. I think about it all the time. Do you ever just think about food?
I mean.
Yes. Cannot stop thinking about it. And we started out with a spicy grilled pineapple guacamole.
Oh, yum.
I'd never had guacamole with pineapple in it, and it was just amazing. I had some sort of chicken taco. I don't remember what the actual title was. And then the margaritas there were just incredible. And I just replay the meal over and over in my mind.
When you replay, like, what makes it the best meal ever? Like the taste of the food, the people you're with, like, what do you replay?
Well, I would have to say a little bit of both. I think that's what makes experiences, over a meal or at a table so powerful. The friends I was with are some of my best friends. We were about to go see a Broadway show. So just the excitement, the people I was with, the conversation, and I think the food definitely enhanced that experience.
Yeah.
But I would go back there again and again.
Oh, so good, right? Do you ever, when you've had like delicious food like that you're thinking about over and over in your head, do you ever try to replicate it at home?
I have definitely done that before, especially, living in the Midwest, growing up in the South. Yeah. I've tried to replicate dishes that aren't really available in the South.
Yeah.
So I've definitely done that before. It's never quite the same, though.
It's never the same. Right. Even like sometimes I feel like oh yeah, that was just as good as like just pep talking myself, trying to make myself feel good. Like, no, it wasn't.
But sometimes I think you're trying to recreate, even subconsciously, you're trying to recreate a moment and not necessarily like a food, because those are all tied to memories. It's all part of the experience.
Yes. Oh, I love it. Okay. So, excuse me while I hop on a plane to New York and get this meal. This
I'm going with
delicious. You. Okay, let's go. Okay, so I want to talk today about feeding people, of course, like we always talk about. But we talk a lot on this show about food and the importance of food. And we also really talk about the magic of the table, that when you sit down for a meal with someone over beautiful food and you really are able to enjoy a conversation and learn about the other person and listen to the other person, magic happens.
Absolutely.
Right? We share a love of the table.
Yes.
So food is an element of that, of course. I really believe really fosters that. But there's something about the magic of the table, like literally when you sit down and you're looking eye to eye with someone and you're really in a posture of listening. It's just, I think about like the most magical moments in my life were when I was sitting at a table. Of course, there was food involved, but it was really eye to eye with somebody, listening to their story and thinking, wow, I have never thought about that before.
Yeah.
I just can't believe how beautiful humanity is. And
That's
I never
so
would
true.
have known that if we hadn't been sitting like this, right?
Yes.
So I want to talk today about the table specifically and the magic of the table and what happens when we sit down with someone different than us, same as us, anyone. And the magic that's involved in all that. So would you just share your story and like how we even got to this table together today?
Yeah.
And I really hope people will listen and hear your story today and think about how they are widening their table, how they really are pulling up another chair and inviting someone to their table so that their life is richer and fuller and more beautiful.
Yeah, I would love to. So like you said, we actually met when we were both working in children's ministry. And all of my life, I wanted to be in ministry. I was involved in a volunteer capacity growing up. Even before I was old enough to volunteer in the children's ministry, I just wanted to do that. I wanted that to be my whole life. And so I allowed myself to be at the church, anytime I could. My parents were both in ministry. So that came to me very organically. But growing up, I grew up in a church, a very conservative home in a small town in Tennessee. And, as I grew older, I knew on one hand that I wanted to be in ministry for the rest of my life and to really help people encounter Jesus. But I also knew something else about myself that didn't really line up with that in the South. And that was that I was gay. And I think there wasn't really a moment when I realized that. I just knew that I was different. And the things that I was told and that I was taught to believe were just in total conflict with the way that I actually felt. But because I was in ministry, you just kind of push that aside. I was so busy and I was involved that I wasn't really thinking at the time about a relationship or any of those things. So I went to college and was involved in a program that was very intensive ministry training for 2 years, and just immersed myself in ministry. And my philosophy at the time was that I really don't need to tap into that area of my life or my sexuality, but that I could just focus all my time and attention on ministry. And so I graduated. I went on to be on staff at several different churches over the course of probably 10 years. I was a pastor. And back in 2012, I was hired at a church in Michigan. And, the thing that attracted me most about that was that it was very targeted towards people who didn't really like church or weren't considered a church people or didn't grow up in church, what have you. Or maybe they'd been hurt by church and didn't have very good experience or a past involving that. So I loved what this church was doing in the community. I loved the people that came that probably wouldn't have entered the doors of a church otherwise. We weren't in a traditional church building. We focused on reaching out, going out into the community. And I just really loved that whole mindset and that concept. And to be honest with you, I didn't know where they stood on, homosexuality or anything of that nature. They were just loving and kind and wanted to reach people. So, but eventually, obviously, I was in my late 20s at the time. And there comes a time in your life when your career is not the most important thing. You just want a relationship with someone. You want that companionship that only comes in the form of a relationship. And so I just began thinking about that. And through a course of several different events, I realized that I grew up believing a lie about myself, that I was somehow damaged, that I could never be as happy as other people were because I was gay. And it was this secret and this burden that I was carrying. And honestly, it just became very, very heavy. And the loneliness is all consuming because at the end of the day, you're left with yourself. And so I just began exploring, what does this mean for my faith? What does this mean for my job? What is, all of these things. And at the end of the day, I realized that my faith doesn't actually conflict with any of that. And so I just came to the conclusion that I was going to be who I was, be the person that I was meant to be. And so I began having those tough conversations. I started with my parents. And the second most important conversation to me was my pastors. Not only because I respected them tremendously, but because that was my job. And like I said, didn't really know where they stood when it came to being gay or the beliefs. I assumed, because of the welcoming expression that they had extended towards other people, that they would hold this with grace, at least. And I went into that meeting and realized that that was not at all the case. And so in that meeting, within a matter of an hour, I was fired from my job as a pastor. I had never been fired from any job ever. But being that my life had been ministry, it was very, very difficult. I was devastated. I was confused. I was hurt. So many emotions. And from that moment, I walked out of that meeting and I had to reconstruct my life from the ground up, because my community, the people that I sat around tables with, were the people at my church. I didn't have friends or family in Michigan. So I literally would have dinner with people. I mean, that was my thing. Several times a week, I was sitting at people's kitchen tables, having dinner with them. They invited me over, and that's how I got to know people. And that's how I became friends. And these people were my family. And so that's the correlation that exists when you sit around a table with someone. So these people knew me deeply. I will say that some of them really responded with such, amazing kindness. And even if they didn't necessarily agree, they at least extended kindness toward me. Some of them were 100% supportive, and some of those relationships completely died. And from there, I entered the communications industry, but it was so vastly different from what I had done my entire adult life, and all because of who I loved and who I was.
Caleb, wow. I mean, like, I know your story and I think the world of you, but just like reliving that with you just now, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing that with everyone. I'm so sorry for what you went through during that time. I was thinking as you were talking about how you wished when you went into the meeting with your pastors that they would hold it with grace. I thought that was such a beautiful thing that you said. And I'm so sorry that that didn't happen. I hope all of us are able to hold moments like that with grace.
Yes.
And I love that you were bold and brave and you did it, and you are like the best version of yourself now, right? So even though that time was really difficult and really terrible and maybe should have gone a different way, like the freedom and the bravery and the strength that I see in you now, I mean, could you have gotten to this, right? Like it's...
I don't think I could have.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of someone's story. There's pain and there's hurt and all of that. But who I am now and who I'm able to be, number one, I don't carry around a weight anymore of wondering if someone's going to find out who I really am or any of that. Like, I can just truly be authentic and focus my energies on the relationships in my life and all those things. So my life is so much better because I did the thing that was hardest, but also the bravest.
Oh my gosh. I love it. I love it so much. I wish everyone could see your smile right now. She's so happy and alive.
It's a real smile.
It's a real smile. Yeah. So if I can just go back for 1 second to when you were talking about sitting at those tables with the people in your church, those were your family and your friends, right?
Yes.
You would go to dinner. So you said that they knew you deeply and yet you weren't like fully yourself, right? So it was like as deep as possible, right?
Yes.
As deep as you could.
Yeah, absolutely.
Both ways, as deeply as you could show yourself and as best they could understand that.
Right.
So what would you say now as someone shows up to a table and they're trying to like bravely show themselves? Like, what would you tell them about showing up at a table and doing your best to like vulnerably and bravely show yourself, even if it's things you haven't told others before or you feel scared about? You feel like you're in a community of people who are showing up to the table with you and that you're safe, of course.
Yes.
But like, what would you say to people? Like, if you could go back now and tell Caleb in those times, like, no, show up to the table and like really show the people,
right,
who you are. What would you say?
That's so interesting because to see the parallel between sitting at those tables with people who wanted to know who I was. And I think many of them honestly did.
Yeah.
But now it's so different for me because I think at the time, like you said, there was such a restricted ability to really be yourself.
Yeah.
And even going into those situations, I can remember you find yourself like looking at the clock, like, it becomes almost businesslike because, this is not just somewhere I can be who I am.
Yeah.
But another thing that's so interesting to me is some of the most powerful conversations that I had after I came out were also around tables.
Wow.
I'm thinking of a particular instance with one of my very best friends. She lives in Chattanooga, and we had worked at a church together, and I came out to her sitting at brunch one day, ironically. And I just remember her telling me with tears streaming down her face, she said, "I've been waiting on you to tell me this for so long.
Wow.
But I wanted to give you the time and the space that you needed."
Yeah.
And one of the best things that she said to me, and I think this is something we can all take away. She said, "I don't know if I agree with you, but I know that this is the best thing for you. And I can see how happy you are. And I know the real you." And so I think in the same way that the conversations before were a little bit superficial, I think the answer is also at the table.
Oh my gosh.
And it's allowing people to be themselves, to be seen. There's power in leaning in and asking questions and getting to know more and just letting people know that you want to know the person that they truly are.
Yeah.
Because food is such a gathering, it's such a form of gathering. And I think food also breaks down barriers. And there's such power at the table and with food and with conversation and sitting for hours and hours talking and hearing someone's story. And I think we have the ability to create that space for people in our lives.
Oh my gosh, come on. Amen. Yes. I agree. I was thinking as you were talking about that, the importance even in just showing up at the table, right?
Yes.
Like you were saying about your best friend when you told her that you were gay and she was waiting for you to say, like, I've been waiting for this for so long. And even though I may disagree or I don't know or whatever, she's just like for a long time been in your life and continually showing up, even though she guessed this was coming, right?
Yeah.
That like you would be sitting at the table someday and and you would tell her this. So I love what you said about like leaning in and really like asking questions and listening. And I think there's such power in just even showing up to the table.
Absolutely.
And actually, in my opinion, like that's the hardest thing to do, because I know for me personally, like it's really easy to have enemies and think poorly of people and judge people in my head.
Yes.
And it's like, well, as long as all my friends are at the table, we can gossip about the people.
Right.
We can say all the things we hate about our enemies. We can be judgy, all that, because they're all like me and we all like agree. But I mean, what good is that for anybody, really? And so I think showing up to a table with someone who is different than you, who has different political views, who has different theological views, is different ethnicity, anything, is some of the like hardest, bravest work. And of course, I always say this with the caveat, like do not show up to unsafe tables,
Right.
but where there's shared safety and shared respect, just showing up. And then like saying, okay, here we are. Let's go. Like, I'm curious about you. I want to learn about you. Let's go. Right.
And that's where the walls break down. And it's been interesting to see that so many of the people that maybe knew me from afar off or weren't so close, those have been the ways that those walls have been broken down because they held an opinion of me, especially after I came out.
Oh my gosh. Right.
But once we, maybe we ran into each other somewhere and we're like, hey, let's grab coffee sometime. All of a sudden, not all of them said, I totally understand.
Yes.
And I support you and all of that. But they said, wow, I never would have thought about it that way. Or I've even said, I've never actually had a friend who was gay. And so I've never had this conversation with someone. And I think it's like you said, showing up is 75%
Yes.
of the battle, because that's where we find out that these are actual people. It's so easy to have an opinion and not know a person. But when we hear a story, when we know someone's perspective, it changes everything.
Changes everything. Exactly. And to me, that's the magic of the table. Not that like that can't happen in other areas or at other venues. But to me, the magic of the table is that when you're sharing food and you're sitting eye to eye, it's such a humanizing experience that it's like, even if I disagree with everything you're saying, like I'm still looking at you this close. Like, I can't think that poorly of you. And even better, like I'm probably going to like you by the end of this time together.
Yes.
And
that's the case. Oftentimes we walk away with such a different viewpoint and such a different perspective.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So I love this whole conversation. Do you have you kind of hinted at this when you said, like you met someone and you went to coffee and they were like, wow, I never thought that before. Do you have any other stories like since you came out, specifically to your church since then, about like going to coffee or going to lunch or dinner with someone and just like them being shocked or surprised, or you being surprised by sitting at a table with someone and thinking like, wow, I never would have known that about this person, or I never would have guessed how wonderful they are?
Yeah, I have a lot of those stories, but one in particular comes to mind, and it's actually pretty funny. I worked at a coffee shop with a girl, and we worked at two different coffee shops together. And so I knew her in that context, but I always felt like our relationship was kind of superficial. We both grew up in a church background, so we had that in common. But it was interesting to me. I was out with some friends one night, and we were just having drinks together, and they were mutual friends of this person. And so she and her husband showed up, and I had not really hung out with them, since I came out, and they didn't really know me in that context.
Yeah.
And so that night, I felt like I could just truly be myself and be authentic. And it was so interesting. We've since developed such a close relationship after that night. They invite me over all the time. Just yesterday, they texted me and said, we're preparing our guest room for when you can come and stay with us.
Yeah. Were you just like, who would have known?
I did not.
Yeah.
I couldn't even imagine that years ago. She and her husband have been such huge allies and friends. And that relationship only happened when I was being my most authentic self. And I almost wonder if it ever would have happened otherwise, because people want to know the real us.
Yes.
And that's when, I mean, they grew up in a very conservative background, in a very conservative home. And they've just been some of my best friends and went out of their way to show their loyalty, their friendship in the smallest but the greatest of ways.
I love that so much. And now you're like, yes, I'm coming over to your house.
Yes.
And staying in your guest room.
Staying in my room.
My room. Oh, I love it. It's not even the guest room anymore. It's just your room. Like a little plaque on the outside or something of it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this has been amazing. Thank you so much for all that you said. I know that my life is richer because my table includes you, and I'll never forget meeting you last fall at the sushi place. That was just so wonderful. And I mean, we're hoping to do a lot with this show, specifically, of course, that inspire people to know that food, unites us, and that we all feed people in a million ways. But I hope today people are really inspired to consider how they can just widen their table just a little bit. Like, I can't imagine how my life would be without knowing you. And so my table is richer and wider because you're sitting here and sitting in my life. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
All right. So let's finish with our lightning round, which you said you love.
It's my favorite part.
So let's go. What is your favorite taco?
Chicken tinga.
Oh, okay. You were ready with that. Where is it? At a specific place?
I've had them at several places. I just ate at Latinicity.
You got it.
Last night, and that might be the best to date.
So good, right? Yes. Your favorite burger?
Oh, pimento cheese.
Okay. We finally have one thing not in common.
Oh, it's a very Southern thing, so I understand.
I really don't get the pimento cheese thing.
It's my favorite thing ever.
Okay, but a pimento cheeseburger.
Pimento cheeseburger, and there's a place in Chattanooga near where I grew up.
Okay.
And it's pimento cheese, balsamic caramelized onions.
Okay.
I feel and this. Chipotle ketchup.
Okay, I feel this. All right. The
pimento cheese is not like an inch thick. It's just a spread. Yeah, perfect. A perfect flavor.
Okay. All right. You've convinced me. Your favorite pizza?
Favorite pizza, barbecue chicken.
Ooh.
Hold the onions.
Yeah. Deep dish. Now, do you like a Chicago deep dish pizza?
I can appreciate it, but only if it has lots of tomato sauce.
Right. People are very particular about the sauce.
Yes.
Okay. Your favorite cookbook?
Favorite cookbook, I will have to say that this is like memoir / cookbook, but Bread and Wine by Shauna Niequist.
Yes.
Those are the recipes I find myself going back to over and over.
What do you have a favorite one?
Oh, my favorite one is probably the bacon wrapped dates.
Yes.
In that book. And I also really love the blueberry crisp.
Oh, yeah.
Those are just good. Like, I can make those just from memory now.
Oh, I love that. Also, when will it be summer and we'll have delicious blueberries again? Is that even on the radar, do you think?
I don't know if it's ever going to come.
No, I don't feel like it is.
We're in an eternal winter.
We're going to need to just channel the blueberry crisp in our mind, because we may never have that again. Okay, finally, your favorite place to eat in Chicago. Where must people eat when they come visit?
My best meal here has been at Cortino.
Yes.
There are many great restaurants in Chicago. I have a long list of places I haven't even tried yet.
Yeah.
But Cortino, I could probably just 100% of the things on their menu, specifically it's like a ragu of some sort.
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
Or it's like a pot roast over homemade pasta.
Oh, yeah. Like the short ribs.
Short ribs.
Yes. Oh, my gosh.
The best.
The best. That is actually a meal I think about all the time. Because the pasta is handmade, there's nothing like it, and then the short ribs are just Amazing.
Yeah, that's high on the list.
What's next on your list? Like when you say you have a long list of places to eat in Chicago, what's like what's one that's right next on your list?
Next on my list, I want to eat at Chicken Shop, which is at the Soho House.
I'm going to take you there.
And I don't know.
Chicken Shop is so good.
That's
so good.
That's definitely on my list.
They have like a fried chicken sandwich. That will be so good. You'll love that.
The Nashville hot chicken is what I want to try.
That's it. Okay. There's chicken. Do you like chicken and waffles?
I love chicken and waffles.
Yeah. Kelly claims that's like the best one in the city. He's a big connoisseur of the chicken and waffles. Okay, Caleb, this has been so great. How can people find you? If people want to follow along, and you should follow along with Caleb's journey and adventure, because literally like your life is just starting, I feel,
yes,
right?
It is.
So where can people follow you online and see what you're up to?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook. You can find me at facebook.com/Caleb Johnson Live, on Twitter at Caleb J Live, and on Instagram at Caleb Johnson Live.
Perfect. You're consistent. I like that. It's all consistent.
Yeah,
you know?
and CalebJohnson.live is my website.
Perfect. Let's end the show with just one piece of advice. As what would you like to say to people as they're thinking about how they can widen their table, how they can sit for a meal with someone and really show up and learn and listen and be open to really learning from another perspective in their lives? What would you say?
I would leave people with a little bit of a challenge. Invite someone over or meet up with someone that you know shares a different opinion or belief than you. Someone who's different than you.
Perfect. Caleb, thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast.